Today we have the pleasure to introduce Monica Holloway next to me. Monica and I.
Thank you for having me.
We just met 10 minutes ago, but I feel like I know her forever. And I have a little something I was going to introduce her with. Usually we sell our books at the end, but everybody was so excited, I guess, to come and grab one that we're doing it right now.
We actually have a few folks who wanted them right away.
Okay, good. That's great. And we have a poster outside, and Monica's publicists are here to help us today, and they're going to be videoing, is that right? And taking some pictures. So before we get started with, I know you're going to have a lot of questions and stuff, and Monica has a plane to catch really soon.
Oh, don't let that. That's okay. Seriously, I'd rather miss my plane than rush you guys.
Okay.
So not to worry. That was my miscalculation. That's why Wills isn't with me. My son Wills was going to come, and he graduated this week, and I was all in a fluster about his graduation. Well, I'll explain it later because he's moving on to a new school, and all of a sudden I realized last week, Wills, we were planning on getting on a flight, and the 9th is the same day as this, and I was thinking 9th is Sunday. So I said, I'll fly out of Ontario, and I just dropped him off at LAX, so he had to miss it. But he wanted to come and meet all of you. So.
And how old is Will?
He just turned 15 on Thursday.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
He's very tall. Yeah.
So Monica Holloway is the critically acclaimed author of Driving with Dead People, which I just finished this morning. And it's been described by Newsweek as unforgettable. Glamour christened this work a classic, and Washington Post deemed it irresistible. I would agree. Holloway contributed the anthology Mommy Wars, from which her essay Red Boots and Coal Hans was described by Newsday as brilliant, grimly hilarious. Monica's latest best-selling memoir, this one here, and the ones that you are buying, I think, are the blue cover. It's the story of her lovable, brilliant, autistic son, Wills, and the remarkable dog who coaxes him into the world. People magazine commented readers would do well to listen to this sweet, heartbreaking tale of boy-dog love. There are so many of us out there, with or without autism, who have our animals to thank for helping us connect. Washington Post said Cowboy and Wills is charming as the author is forthright and winning. Cowboy and Wills is a prestigious Mom's Choice Award Gold recipient and has been published in over 6 languages. Holloway is actively involved in the National Center for Family Literacy and Autism Speaks, raising awareness and participation for the issues she deeply cares about, both as a mother and an author. She's especially honored to have participated in several events with the Special Needs Network, whose work is paramount in helping at-risk families. And you can correct me if I'm wrong here. Monica is at work on her 3rd book right now. And Monica lives in Los Angeles with her family, 2 golden retrievers. And correct me on this, a hamster, 4 hermit crabs, 3 jumpy frogs, 2 rabbits, and 6 neon citrus.
And 2 guinea pigs.
And 2 guinea pigs.
We just rescued them. So. If you knew how small my house was, you really would laugh. Very small.
So today we're going to just maybe touch on this one briefly and then talk quite a bit about this one here. And Monica's going to tell you her story of how she got to where she is with these books. But I have a few questions before we get started, and then it's going to be all Monica. Okay? Your first book, Driving with Dead People, is a memoir about abuse, driving a hearse, a complicated and convoluted set of adult relationships, and it ultimately, we have deep lies and secrets. So readers would never expect that your subsequent book would feature, in case you haven't seen, a photo of an adorable golden retriever pup with a soccer ball and a smiling angelic toddler. Can you offer some background here?
On the difference between the two?
Yes.
My first book, I'm from the Midwest, from Ohio, and my first book was always waiting to come out of me, way before I had Wills, before I was married. I was an actress for a long time in New York, and and regional theater as well. And actually, I did my graduate school work in I went to graduate school in La Jolla at UCSD and worked at the La Jolla Playhouse for a long time. And there, I started to develop a one-woman show, which I ended up doing in New York. And that's the first time that I wrote anything, like really sat down and wrote. And I'd always wanted to, but I thought, well, I'm not bright enough to write a book. Even though my grades were fine, I just was like, somehow there was something in my head, I don't know, that it's like, if you write a book, you have to be like a certain kind of person, you have to be a certain kind of brainy person. And I've always been a kind of a quirky person and a funny person. And so once I did my one-woman show, the bug had bitten me, and I started to write about my childhood. And in my town, which is, it's really interesting. I don't know, have any of you read the book? Do you want me to do a little synopsis or a synopsis? I wonder if it would be better if it might be better, do you mind if I just read the back cover? Because if I try to explain it, I'll go off on a very long tangent. And this will kind of tell you, and then we can talk about it if you have questions as well. I'll tell you that the title, Driving with Dead People, as Andrea said, is about, I drove a hearse in high school for extra money. I would go to the Cincinnati airport and pick up bodies and then bring them back through our small town and by their farm and take them by their favorite little restaurant or the post office if they liked it, and then take them to the mortuary. And we always went through Hardee's drive-through and we smoked. And it was the mortician's daughter and myself. We were best of friends, and I actually befriended her because I was very unhappy. I was a joyful child, but I had a very violent father and a neglectful, very cold mother. And I can say that truly. And she can disagree and he can disagree, but that is my truth. So growing up with that family and that background, by the time I was 9, a little girl was hit by a car in our hometown. And I knew everyone in our hometown, and I didn't know her. And I remember being mortified that well, she was on the front of the local newspaper. Do you mind if I just read a quick little moment there? And I opened with this, and I just said, it changed everything. A school picture printed on the front page of the Elk Grove Courier. The newspaper my father was reading. I was 8. Sitting across the breakfast table from my dad, I pointed. Who is she? She's dead. He kept reading. What happened? I asked. No answer. I leaned forward to get a closer look. She looked like me. Same short cropped hair with razor straight bangs, same ones I have today. Same heart-shaped face, exact same wool-plaid jumper. I looked at Dad, bloated, smudged glasses slid halfway down his nose. Why wasn't he telling me what happened? He loved talking gore. He lived for it, documented it even. So my dad used to ride in his pickup truck with his Kodak camera on the passenger seat so he could videotape tornadoes, car wrecks, fires. He was an ambulance chaser, basically. And then in between those home movies were pictures of us getting our Easter baskets and my brother Mark's first home run. And it was, there was a life that was public and then a life that was private. It's not only my story. And for so many years, I lived wanting to tell people what had happened and have them believe me. And also because my dad was sort of a pillar of our town and very humorous and people liked him a lot. And I felt like when the day finally came that I was ready to tell people and let it go, my father and my mother refused to cooperate and be part of our lives and everything. And so I decided to write a book, and I got obsessed about death. Like I said, when I was 5 and going back, and I did go off on a long tangent. So let me just read really quickly. It says, small wonder that at 9 years old, Monica Holloway developed a fascination with the local funeral home. It was the only mortuary in our hometown. And that's why I befriended this little girl who ended up being my best friend and still is my very best friend in the world. I've known her since I was 8 because I wanted to play in the funeral home. I wanted to know where the dead people were. And I guess probably there was a part of me that I didn't want to be dead, but I wanted the pain to go away, and I had this impression that, and they weren't, they didn't frighten me because they couldn't talk or do anything to me, and all my friends were terrified of death, and I was so fascinated that I got fixated on this little girl that had died in a car accident, and I convinced my grandmother, who I call Granda, to take me to her funeral. And in a small town like that, everybody goes to everybody's funeral, and that's when I found out she was Catholic, and that's why I didn't know her. Because being Catholic in my little Ohio farm town was like being a snake handler. It was that, there was the Catholic school, and so I was like, oh, she's Catholic, that's why, now I'm like, of course, I understood soon that was ridiculous. But so when I found out she went to the Catholic school, I was like, man, I don't know her or her friends, and it was disappointing. But when I saw her in her casket, I realized that no matter what my father did to me, no matter how many times my mom didn't listen, I could never be that, because I knew by looking at her that there was nowhere back from where she'd gone. So I kind of used her in my mind as a fantasy of like, wherever she is, she's safe and she's okay. And I didn't know her. And her family was very shocked and touched when this came out and got a hold of me. Because I ended with one of the things that you were talking about, where I go back in the epilogue, and it's the first time in 22 years I'm in my hometown, and my sister and I literally sneak in there I wanted to do research and make sure that the newspaper looked like I thought it had, and it looked exactly like it. I'm going through microfiche. I mean, I'm only 49, or I am 49, which is old or not old, whatever it is, it's fine with me. But microfiche, that's old. So I'm like, now it's online, I guess, or most of it. And that picture came up of her, and it was exactly as I recalled. And I was able to put the exact article in the book of her dying. So I became friends with Julie Kilner, who was the daughter of the mortician. And by coming up, I began to face what had happened and became my own person, and separated from my family, even at a young age. And so, I don't know, does that give a good... Sure. I went on, but that's basically a little bit of it. And it sounds really grim, but I hope it's humorous too, because it was kind of a crazy childhood and a difficult childhood, but I had a lot of fun, and there were a lot of insane things that happened. And I think that's what I like the most about maybe this book, is that I told my story, the one I always wanted to tell, but I think I told it, and especially toward my father. I tried to be. I don't sugarcoat things. I don't like that, and I don't like lies, and I don't like secrets. But I also didn't write this book to bash my father or my mother. I wrote it to tell my truth, and what I hope I accomplished in it was. As you read the book, you find out, as I was finding out, what happened to me. Because early on, certainly when I was really little, and I'd go to bed at night and wake up, I didn't really hold a memory of what had happened in the night, although I had nightmares and dreams, until my sister came out with what had happened in it. I knew anyway, but then I really knew. So I wanted the book to...
Today we have the pleasure to introduce Monica Holloway next to me. Monica and I.
Thank you for having me.
We just met 10 minutes ago, but I feel like I know her forever. And I have a little something I was going to introduce her with. Usually we sell our books at the end, but everybody was so excited, I guess, to come and grab one that we're doing it right now.
We actually have a few folks who wanted them right away.
Okay, good. That's great. And we have a poster outside, and Monica's publicists are here to help us today, and they're going to be videoing, is that right? And taking some pictures. So before we get started with, I know you're going to have a lot of questions and stuff, and Monica has a plane to catch really soon.
Oh, don't let that. That's okay. Seriously, I'd rather miss my plane than rush you guys. Okay. So not to worry. That was my miscalculation. That's why Wills isn't with me. My son Wills was going to come, and he graduated this week, and I was all in a fluster about his graduation. Well, I'll explain it later because he's moving on to a new school. And all of a sudden, I realized last week, Wills, we were planning again getting on a flight, and the 9th is the same day as this, and I was thinking 9th is Sunday. So I said, I'll fly out of Ontario, and I just dropped him off at LAX, so he had to miss it. But he wanted to come and meet all of these.
And how old is Will?
He just turned 15 on
15.
Thursday.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
He's very tall. Yeah.
So Monica Holloway is the critically acclaimed author of Driving with Dead People, which I just finished this morning. And it's been described by Newsweek as unforgettable. Glamour christened this work a classic, and Washington Post deemed it irresistible. I would agree. Holloway contributed the anthology Mommy Wars, from which her essay Red Boots and Coal Hans was described by Newsday as brilliant, grimly hilarious. Monica's latest best-selling memoir, this one here, and the ones that you are buying, I think, are the blue cover. It's the story of her lovable, brilliant, autistic son, Wills, and the remarkable dog who coaxes him into the world. People magazine commented readers would do well to listen to this sweet, heartbreaking tale of boy-dog love. There are so many of us out there, with or without autism, who have our animals to thank for helping us connect. Washington Post said Cowboy and Wills is charming as the author is forthright and winning. Cowboy and Wills is a prestigious Mom's Choice Award Gold recipient and has been published in over 6 languages. Holloway is actively involved in the National Center for Family Literacy and Autism Speaks, raising awareness and participation for the issues she deeply cares about, both as a mother and an author. She's especially honored to have participated in several events with the Special Needs Network, whose work is paramount in helping at-risk families. And you can correct me if I'm wrong here. Monica is at work on her 3rd book
Yeah.
right now.
That's right.
And Monica lives in Los Angeles with her family, 2 golden retrievers, and correct me on this, a hamster, 4 hermit crabs, 3 jumpy frogs, 2 rabbits, and 6 neon citrus.
And 2 guinea pigs.
And 2
We just rescued them. So. If you knew how small my house was, you really would laugh. Very small.
So today we're going to just maybe touch on this one briefly and then talk quite a bit about this one here. And Monica's going to tell you her story of how she got to where she is with these books. But I have a few questions before we get started, and then it's going to be all Monica. Okay? Your first book, Driving with Dead People, is a memoir about abuse, driving a hearse, a complicated and convoluted set of adult relationships, and it ultimately, we have deep lies and secrets. So readers would never expect that your subsequent book would feature, in case you haven't seen, a photo of an adorable golden retriever pup with a soccer ball and a smiling angelic toddler. Can you offer some background here?
On the difference between the two?
Yes.
My first book, I'm from the Midwest, from Ohio, and my first book was always waiting to come out of me, way before I had Will, before I was married. I was an actress for a long time in New York, and regional theater as well. And actually, I did my graduate school work in I went to graduate school in La Jolla at UCSD and worked at the La Jolla Playhouse for a long time. And there, I started to develop a one-woman show, which I ended up doing in New York. And that's the first time that I wrote anything, like really sat down and wrote. And I'd always wanted to, but I thought, well, I'm not bright enough to write a book. Even though my grades were fine, I just was like, somehow there was something in my head, I don't know, that it's like, if you write a book, you have to be like a certain kind of person, a certain kind of, you have to be a certain kind of brainy person. And I've always been a kind of a quirky person and a funny person. And so once I did my one-woman show, the bug had bitten me, and I started to write about my childhood. And in my town, which is, it's really interesting. I don't know, have any of you read the book? Do you want me to do a little synopsis or a synopsis? I wonder if it would be better if it might be better, do you mind if I just read the back cover? Because if I try to explain it, I'll go off on a very long tangent. And this will kind of tell you, and then we can talk about it if you have questions as well. I'll tell you that The title, Driving with Dead People, as Andrea said, is about, I drove a hearse in high school for extra money. I would go to the Cincinnati airport and pick up bodies and then bring them back through our small town and by their farm and take them by their favorite little restaurant or the post office if they liked it, and then take them to the mortuary. And we always went through Hardee's drive-through and we smoked. And it was the mortician's daughter and myself. We were bested friends, and I actually befriended her because I was very unhappy. I was a joyful child, but I had a very violent father and a neglectful, very cold mother. And I can say that truly. And she can disagree and he can disagree, but that is my truth. So growing up with that family and that background, by the time I was 9, a little girl was hit by a car in our hometown. And I knew everyone in our hometown, and I didn't know her. And I remember being mortified that well, she was on the front of the local newspaper. Do you mind if I just read a quick little moment there? And I opened with this, and I just said, it changed everything. A school picture printed on the front page of the Elk Grove Courier. The newspaper my father was reading. I was 8. Sitting across the breakfast table from my dad, I pointed. Who is she? She's dead. He kept reading. What happened? I asked. No answer. I leaned forward to get a closer look. She looked like me. Same short cropped hair with razor straight bangs, same ones I have today. Same heart-shaped face, exact same wool plaid jumper. I looked at Dad, bloated, smudged glasses slid halfway down his nose. Why wasn't he telling me what happened? He loved talking gore. He lived for it, documented it even. So my dad used to ride in his pickup truck with his Kodak camera on the passenger seat so he could videotape tornadoes, car wrecks, fires. He was an ambulance chaser, basically. And then in between those home movies were pictures of us getting our Easter baskets and my brother Mark's first home run. And it was, there was a life that was public and then a life that was private. You know, it's not only my story. And for so many years, I lived wanting to tell people what had happened and have them believe me. And also because my dad was sort of a pillar of our town and very humorous and people liked him a lot. And I felt like when the day finally came that I was ready to tell people and let it go, my father and my mother refused to cooperate and be part of our lives and everything. And so I decided to write a book, and I got obsessed about death. Like I said, when I was 5 and going back, and I did want to go off on a long tangent. So let me just read really quickly. It says, small wonder that at 9 years old, Monica Holloway developed a fascination with the local funeral home. It was the only mortuary in our hometown. And that's why I befriended this little girl who ended up being my best friend and still is my very best friend in the world. I've known her since I was 8 because I wanted to play in the funeral home. I wanted to know where the dead people were. And I guess probably there was a part of me that I didn't want to be dead, but I wanted the pain to go away. And I had this impression that, and they didn't frighten me because they couldn't talk or do anything to me. And all my friends were terrified of death, and I was so fascinated that I got fixated on this little girl that had died in a car accident. And I convinced my grandmother, who I called Granda, to take me to her funeral. And in a small town like that, everybody goes to everybody's funeral. And that's when I found out she was Catholic, and that's why I didn't know her. Because being Catholic in my little Ohio farm town was like being a snake handler. It was that, you know, there was the Catholic school, you know, and so I was like, oh, she's Catholic, that's why, you know, now I'm like, of course, I understood soon that was ridiculous. But so when I found out she went to the Catholic school, I was like, man, I don't know her or her friends, and it was disappointing. But when I saw her in her casket, I realized that no matter what my father did to me, no matter how many times my mom didn't listen, I could never be that. Because I knew by looking at her that there was nowhere back from where she'd gone. So I kind of used her in my mind as a fantasy of like, you know, wherever she is, she's safe and she's okay. And I didn't know her. and I didn't know, and her family was very shocked and touched when this came out, and got a hold of me. Because well, I ended with one of the things that you were talking about, where I go back in the epilogue, and it's the first time in 22 years I'm in my hometown, and my sister and I literally sneak in there I wanted to do research and make sure that the newspaper looked like I thought it had, and it looked exactly like it. I'm going through microfiche. I mean, I'm only 49, or I am 49, which is old or not old, whatever it is, it's fine with me. But microfiche, that's old. So I'm like, now it's online, I guess, or most of it. And that picture came up of her, and it was exactly as I recalled. And I was able to put the exact article in the book of her dying. So I became friends with Julie Kilner, who was the daughter of the mortician. And by coming up, I began to face what had happened and became my own person, and separated from my family, even at a young age. And so, I don't know, does that give a good... Sure. I went on and on, but that's basically a little bit of it. And it sounds really grim, but I hope it's humorous too, because it was kind of a crazy childhood and a difficult childhood, but I had a lot of fun, and there were a lot of insane things that happened. And I think that's what I like the most about maybe this book, is that I told my story, the one I always wanted to tell, but I think I told it, and especially toward my father. I tried to be. I don't sugarcoat things. I don't like that, and I don't like lies, and I don't like secrets. But I also didn't write this book to bash my father or my mother. I wrote it to tell my truth, and what I hope I accomplished in it was. As you read the book, you find out, as I was finding out, what happened to me. Because early on, certainly when I was really little, and I'd go to bed at night and wake up, I didn't really hold a memory of what had happened in the night, although I had nightmares and dreams, until my sister came out with what had happened in it. I knew anyway, but then I really knew. So I wanted the book to unfold as it unfolded for me. And I hope that's what I hope the most for this book. And that anybody in my hometown that ever thought about hurting or touching a child would know that maybe someday, maybe 25 years would go by, but you might just get called out. This might just hit the bestseller. And you might be really, don't touch your kids. Don't hurt your kids. Don't lie to your kids. Don't do it. And I hope that I've changed a little part of the world with this book. And that's where I was when I wrote that.
When the hardcover came out, was it this cover? Mm-hmm. This is a great cover. I almost wanted to read this book because the cover. I just love this cover. And then you have the hearse on the back. Of course, I wasn't as keen on that. It's the cover.
Well, that's a little bit on the nose.
That's the story. There it is.
Yeah.
So I know that your name is Monica, but this had to be written under a pseudonym. Is that correct?
Well, I changed my name. Holloway is there's a lot in here about my grandmother, Granda, who lived in a double-wide trailer around the block from us. And I honestly think sometimes that if I didn't have Granda in my life as a small child, I think I probably would have lived through my childhood. But there were many times I didn't want to, and especially when the train would go by, and I thought something was wrong with me, and that's why all these terrible things were happening to me with my father, and my mother was ignoring it. But I really think that my Granda, I remember going to my first therapy session, and, years ago when I was an actress in New York, and I remember this therapist saying, somebody really loved you, or you wouldn't be sitting here like this, and you wouldn't be as cheerful as you are. And I thought that was my Granda. Mm-hmm. So I was able to really pay tribute to her in this book. And I forgot the question.
The names?
Oh, right. So Granda's maiden name is Holloway, and I wanted to keep. So my legal name is Monica Buckley Price, and Monica Buckley is my father's name. Buckley's my father's name, and I used to think he can't take my name from me. He took everything from me, but he's not taking my name until I started to realize that every time I wrote Buckley, I thought of him, and then the whole bunch, and I was like, well, that's my name. So I tried to make peace with that, and then I got married to Michael Price, who I love, and he's a writer also, so it was Monica Buckley Price. So when I was starting to do the book, I had toyed with taking Holloway, but barely. I would say maybe just in a little bit of a fantasy thing. And Simon & Schuster said, the one we were trying to keep my parents from suing me, which is crazy. Right. And I thought, well, if they come after me, that's fine, because I was ready for a big fight. And they're like, that's not fine with us. We don't want that to happen. So we changed every single name in the book, even the name of my childhood dog. It's changed from, we made it Buddy, but it's Sugar. It's Sugar. So when we were back there, like trying to get all the research done, my sister and I trying to hide in the public library in this tiny town of less than, I guess there was 1,800 people there, that's it. And it's 99% Caucasian. You know, it's just in the middle of nowhere. And we went to the graveyard because I was afraid I would not go back and see my grandmother and my grand's graves and, you know, the people I loved. And I went with Grandma to put the flowers on the graves my whole life, for every holiday and every birthday. And so it was really important to me that I put flowers on everybody's graves and take pictures. So Joanne, my sister, was with me, and she was taking the pictures. And I was looking at the graves, and I looked up, and I saw this really big tombstone, which actually was my great-great-grandmother's tombstone. And it said, Holloway. And I always knew my grandmother was Ruth Marie Med. Med was her married name. And I was like, she's a Holloway. And then all of a sudden I turned to my sister, I said, I could be a Holloway. And then I'd be with the strong women and the women who took care of their children and the best side of our family. And that was the first time I thought, because I was so mad when Simon & Schuster said I couldn't publish under my own name after telling my truth finally. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. And they didn't tell me until 2 weeks before print.
Oh my goodness.
Which was, I don't know, you know, they're great. And I'm doing my third book with them, and I've been with them through all my books. They're just amazing. So I don't think that anything was, they weren't trying to startle me. I just think that they really started to believe that the book was strong enough that they would come after me. And in fact, my mom and my middle sister, mostly my middle sister, did come after me, and my father moved to Florida and said nothing. So, Darlene, who's in the back, knows that, so we've been trying to officially change my name to Monica Holloway, and I haven't gotten to the courthouse, so that my name is going to be, so I just saw my lawyer, was it a week before last, and so as of the 22nd of June, I will be Monica Holloway, legally, and nobody else, and I'm taking my middle name is going to be my grand's first name, so Monica Margaret Holloway. So that feels like me. I don't know. And I really screwed up my family tree, I can't tell you. We've all been on Ancestry.com together, and next to me it's always like Holloway blank. It's like Price? Michael Price? I don't know who he is. So anyway.
Well, your second book, Cowboy and Wills, is compared to Driving with Dead People, is a hopeful, informative, profound book. And you do deal with family challenges and outcomes. However, your honesty, you shed light on your fears with your honesty and your worries and neuroses. Both books are touching on the theme of getting to know feelings and sharing them. Can you comment on that?
Yes, I unfold as it unfolded for me. And I hope that's what I hope the most for this book. And that anybody in my hometown that ever thought about hurting or touching a child would know that maybe someday, maybe 25 years would go by, but you might just get called out. This might just hit the bestseller. And you might be really, don't touch your kids. Don't hurt your kids. Don't lie to your kids. You know, don't do it. And I hope that I've changed a little part of the world with this book. And that's where I was when I wrote that.
When the hardcover came out, was it this cover? Mm-hmm. This is a great cover. I almost wanted to read this book because the cover, I just love this cover. And then you have the hearse on the back. Of course, I wasn't as keen on that. It's the cover.
Well, that's a little bit on the nose.
That's the story. There it is.
Yeah.
So I know that your name is Monica, but this had to be written under a pseudonym. Is that correct?
Well, I changed my name. Holloway is there's a lot in here about my grandmother, Granda, who lived in a double-wide trailer around the block from us. And I honestly think sometimes that if I didn't have Granda, in my life as a small child. I think I probably would have lived through my childhood, but there were many times I didn't want to, and especially when the train would go by, and I thought something was wrong with me, and that's why all these terrible things were happening to me with my father, and my mother was ignoring it. But I really think that my granddad, I remember going to like my first therapy session, years ago when I was an actress in New York, and I remember this therapist saying, somebody really loved you, or you wouldn't be sitting here like this, and you wouldn't be as cheerful as you are. And I thought that was my granddad. So I was able to really pay tribute to her in this book. And I forgot the question.
The names?
Oh,
your name.
Right. So Granda's maiden name is Holloway, and I wanted to keep. So my legal name is Monica Buckley Price, and Monica Buckley is my father's name. Buckley's my father's name, and I used to think he can't take my name from me. He took everything from me, but he's not taking my name until I started to realize that every time I wrote Buckley, I thought of him and them, like the whole bunch, and I was like, well, that's my name. So I tried to make peace with that, and then I got married to Michael Price, who I love, and he's a writer also, so it was Monica Buckley Price. So when I was starting to do the book, I had toyed with taking Holloway, but barely. I would say maybe just in a little bit of a fantasy thing. And Simon & Schuster said, the one, we were trying to keep my parents from suing me, which is crazy. Right. And I thought, well, if they come after me, that's fine, because I was ready for a big fight, and they're like, that's not fine with us. We don't want that to happen. So we changed every single name in the book, even the name of my childhood dog is changed. We made it Buddy, but it's Sugar. It's Sugar. So when we were back there, trying to get all the research done, my sister and I trying to hide in the public library in this tiny town of less than, I guess there was 1,800 people there, that's it. And it's 99% Caucasian. It's just in the middle of nowhere. And we went to the graveyard because I was afraid I would not go back and see my grandmother and my grand's graves and, the people I loved. And I went with Granda to put the flowers on the graves my whole life, for every holiday and every birthday. And so it was really important to me that I put flowers on everybody's graves and take pictures. So Joanne, my sister, was with me, and she was taking the pictures. And I was looking at the graves, and I looked up, and I saw this really big tombstone, which actually was my great-great-grandmother's tombstone. And it said, Holloway. And I always knew my grandmother was Ruth Marie Med. Med was her married name, and I was like, she's a Holloway. And then all of a sudden I turned to my sister, I said, I could be a Holloway, and then I'd be with the strong women and the women who took care of their children and the best side of our family. And that was the first time I thought, because I was so mad when Simon & Schuster said I couldn't publish under my own name after telling my truth finally. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. And they didn't tell me until 2 weeks before print.
Oh my goodness.
Which was, I don't know, they're great, and I'm doing my third book with them, and I've been with them through all my books. They're just amazing. So I don't think that anything was, they weren't trying to startle me. I just think that they really started to believe that the book was strong enough that they would come after me. And in fact, my mom and my middle sister, mostly my middle sister, did come after me, and my father moved to Florida and said nothing. So, Darlene, who's in the back, knows that, so we've been trying to officially change my name to Monica Holloway, and I haven't gotten to the courthouse, so my name is going to be, so I just saw my lawyer, was it a week before last, and so as of the 22nd of June, I will be Monica Holloway, legally, and nobody else, and I'm taking my middle name is going to be my grand's first name, so Monica Margaret Holloway. So that feels like me. I don't know. And I really screwed up my family tree, I can't tell you. We've all been on Ancestry.com together, and next to me it's always like Holloway blank. It's like Price? Michael Price? I don't know who he is. So anyway.
Well, your second book, Cowboy and Wills, is compared to Driving with Dead People, is a hopeful, informative profound book, and you do deal with family challenges and outcomes. However, your honesty, you shed light on your fears with your honesty and your worries and neuroses. Both books are touching on the theme of getting to know feelings and sharing them. Can you comment on that?
Yes, I came out here for a visit, and she said, how do you deal with the autism? How do I deal with saying, you know, my child can't get on stage anymore, my child can't read anymore? She said, how do you say Wills has autism? I said, it's like Wills has peanut butter and jelly, Wills has blonde hair, Wills has... She has a whole different battle than I have, and so I'm helping her in a whole different way. But the point is, if Wills didn't have autism, he wouldn't be him. He wouldn't be Wills, and I wouldn't be sitting here. I feel like a very whole person now, and by helping him get over his fear, believe it or not, I got over my fear, because I didn't realize that I was still scared to go in a parking lot. I was afraid. I had this fantasy weird thing that my father was outside my house, and I would close all my curtains at night, you know, and it was unconscious actually. But I live in a lot of fear, and I don't live that way at all, because Wills and I got over our fear, not together. He had his journey and I had mine, but we were linked in arms together. And he was just, is my biggest joy. And the idea that I would ever have, you know, a perfect house, or that I would have all these kids. And when I was a very, you know, I had a lot of work to do on myself when he arrived, and from my past. And I got that done, or as best I could. I still, you know, it's never over. You have to keep working. I just feel like, especially going to readings like this, and I've, you know, been all over the country with both books. The number of us that have perfect lives are zero. It's zero, and that's good, because that means we're interesting and we have our stories and we've really lived. I feel like if you haven't really lived, then maybe you have a perfect life, but I don't want that anymore. I just don't want that anymore, and because I don't want Wills to feel less than, and I don't think and I'm sure that he doesn't. And if he were here, I wish he were here, because he loves. I don't know if he loves it, but he does talk a lot at readings, and he starts out in the back, and then pretty soon here he comes, and he always brings his dog. He always brings his golden retriever he got off. Cowboy only lived 2 years. Because the other thing, you know, and I keep saying about myself, like, really? I got my autistic child a dog that had cancer. That's that, you know, but I did that, and I didn't know. And he had, we have a boy dog now, but she had canine lupus, and ended up being a puppy mill puppy, which we didn't know. So Wills is now very much against puppy mills, and we've given a lot of money to shut down. Well, we shut down the place where we got Cowboy. It's done. We went in on a lawsuit with 150 other people, and that place is gone. And we do a lot with Best Friends and Rescue. So he's just learned to be empathetic and generous. But when Cowboy, I don't know what you guys want to know about the book. Do you read it? I'm kind of going on and on.
You're going to read a little part of it, right?
I can, sure.
Yeah.
I'm happy to read, or I can tell you whatever you want to know. He ended up naming her Cowboy Carol Lawrence. But he doesn't know who Carol Lawrence is. He named her Cowboy, and we had all these cards all over his bedroom wall about different names for the puppy, because he started kindergarten, and it was so rough on him. The transition, preschool was horrible, but kindergarten was like, it was worse than anything I could have ever imagined. And we put him in a private school, a very progressive, easygoing. My husband calls it a granola type school, you know, and lovely people, but he could not transition. So he was spending a lot of time rocking, which he really didn't normally do, with his hands over his ears, and we were thinking maybe he wouldn't stay at that school, and worried. So we were getting him tested, we were getting an aide for him, a shadow, and he was in the car and had a horrible day. They'd already called me twice. And I had been outside the school the whole day in my car crying, just waiting, like, if they need me, I'll go in. If they don't, he could look out the window and see me out there. And he got in, and I said, you know, maybe we need a puppy, without asking my husband, so that people would know she was a girl. So we were picking up Cowboy Carol. The front window of the pet chalet was resplendent. The pet chalet is where we got her. Was resplendent with swirling, glittery snowflakes and hand-painted holly leaves, reminding LA that it was indeed Christmas, despite the heat. Will stood below a sign that read, "Special order your puppy or kitten today," his nose pressed against the glass, hands cupped on either side of his face. Inside were 3 baby cribs painted white, blue, and yellow. In each one, 2 or 3 fuzzy puppies. Standard poodles, shih tzus, labradors were rolling around, chewing on each other's ears or sleeping in piles. Will stayed cemented to his spot, quietly taking in the chaos through the window and listening to the cacophony of oohs and ahs wafting out the open door. I placed my hand on his narrow back, while Michael, his dad, knelt down beside him, wrapping his arm around Will's waist. Will looked up at me. "She's in there," I said. "Once we get her away from here, we can get out of this crowded place." Tears streamed down his face. "She's waiting," he said. I pulled a wrinkled Kleenex out of my purse and dabbed his face. "Do you want me to go and get her?" Michael asked. "I can bring her outside, away from the noise." I would not have said I wouldn't have had a child with a disability. I might have said that, because I lived in like that denial place. But I think I would have said, I wouldn't have known the richness of loving somebody for just who they are. Because the expectations I had for him as my child or as a baby, my child's going to be, well, I never had that because he was never that from the very beginning. And that was such a gift to him and to me, that he was always just who he was. As it came at me, that's how it was. And we dealt with it accordingly, as sad and as happy and as wild as it's been. And my husband, he writes for The Simpsons, and he's very funny. And so we laugh a lot, like we uproariously laugh a lot at our house. And so that used to be very hard for Will. Like he didn't like laughter. And here we were, 2 comics, you know, just like, wow, we both in theater and comedies, you know, natural-born performers with a child that didn't like. And so Will took the stage with one of the leads in Guys and Dolls last Wednesday and sang with a full body mic beautifully. And we had all of his whole team in one row, and my husband in the middle and me on the side, and all of us. I just looked down, and as we were all smiling, but everyone was crying for where he's come and what everyone's done for him and the work he's done for himself. I didn't know. That's a miracle to me. He's a miracle. I feel like putting the past away and saying, you know what, I don't know why my father was like that. I have some ideas, but I'll never really know. But, you know, that's his problem. I'm an adult now. It's not my problem anymore. And as long as he doesn't hurt anybody else. And I feel very shocked by that. I feel shocked to be genuinely present. Not always genuinely happy, because you can't be happy all the time. But I would say that I'm, not to be all gushy, but that I'm lucky. I'm really lucky, and I'm lucky. And I used to say this to Will, and I realized it was true of me too. He'd say, why am I going to all these therapies and nobody else? And I said, you know, everyone has something that they deal with in life. And I said, it's not fair. It's not fair that you have to deal with this at such an early age. But you know what? Down the line, so, you know, you don't know what's coming for everybody. I'm giving examples like people who were being tutored for other things that he already knew. But I realized, you know, that for me as well, I suffered at an early age, and now I'm not. So, and I do suffer. I mean, we all suffer here and there at different times. But and I'm so glad I'm not going through life pretending that those things didn't happen to me. That's how I feel. And I don't want him to ever be. I don't want him, for instance, to start school in the fall and feel like he can't say, you know, I have Asperger's, if he wants to. Or say, wow, I had a crazy wild time of it. Or I'm having trouble, you know, I have Asperger's, so I don't always understand the jokes. So can you tell me how that works? And he's pretty good at that. And I just hope he'll be that way in high school. We'll see. I mean, we'll see. But I don't want him to have to start pretending. Not now, not ever. But, you know, I can only do so much about that. So that's all shocking to me, and it's shocking that I'm still married after 18 years. So that was a rough time with Wills when he was little. My husband didn't want him to be autistic, didn't want to acknowledge it. He'll say that to you. We just did an interview together, our first one together, oddly, because where he admitted and I was so proud of him. It was this week. We did it on Autism Live, and he said, you know, for all the fathers that are listening, I was there. I tried to deny it away. And it was very hard on my wife, and it was an awful thing to do to my son, but I was terrified. And when I finally realized how terrified I was, I got through it, but with help. So I'm shocked that he stayed around, and I still really like him a lot. So yeah, I'd say that works for me.
How about questions? Anybody have any questions for Monica?
Non-stop.
I do. Well, you were talking about now your son will say, you know, maybe he had Asperger's or whatever to explain something. But the one scene in the book that got me was when he was in kindergarten, and I haven't gone through the whole book yet, and he was doing the show and crying on the stage, and the mother is coming up to you and saying, "Oh, your son's so sad. What can we do to help?" And you were talking about, well, I wanted to say he has autism, and you know. But you didn't. Did it take a time before you started talking about it? Or?
That's a great question. That's a great question. And I got really called out on that in the Washington Post. And what happened was when we first we didn't know how severe Wills was because he was very high functioning in some areas and then not in other areas. So we didn't know when he finally got to school what it was going to look like. So we wanted him to model the kids that weren't having those kinds of struggles. The school knew everything. Of course, we told them before they accepted us and everything that they saw his testing, and we talked about, you know, he definitely had. Then they were saying he was high functioning autistic, so he wasn't really far enough to be Asperger's at that point. And his therapist recommended, which was, I will say, this is the one mistake I think she did make. She said, when we went into kindergarten, she said, the best thing you can do is just let him be him and not put a label on him at that school. So they even made his shadow a third teacher so that the kids wouldn't feel like she was just there for him. And it did confuse a lot of parents, and it was very hard for me because not only did I not get support, but because people didn't know, but also people were confused about it. And I think that was a big mistake. And so in first grade, we came in and we brought Will's therapist and my husband and I, and we sat down with the class and we explained Wills has autism and this is what autism is. And he talked a little bit about it, and we read a book, and they were like, oh, that's why he plays with the hose all the time, so he doesn't have to, you know, interact or do this, or he won't go to the boys' restroom, he would only go to the teacher's restroom. Oh, that's why he does it. You know, when you tell somebody, it makes sense. Mm-hmm. But, you know, and I wish I had made more of a point of the book to say, yes, I did get over that. And it wasn't even that, and there was some shame with it, which I feel so guilty about. I mean, I try not to feel guilty about it, but I was devastated.
Well, you don't want to label your kid either. I think
well,
that's a big thing.
But I do think, yeah, it is, but I think that mother was trying to
she was maybe trying to understand what was going on too.
Of course. And so, yeah, that really happened, and I was like, I said, you know, yeah, he's struggling. He's struggling. Yeah, that's a good question. That's a great question.
First of all, I just really like to thank you for telling your story.
Oh, thank you. I feel like you guys are going to go have a nap after this.
Well, I mean, in writing about them, I bought both books. I haven't read them. I just bought them as I walked through the door, and to know that I couldn't resist the driving with dead people, because whoever reads a book like that, and to know that it's your true story and not just fiction makes it more rich. I'm really excited to read both. I don't know if this is an appropriate question, but after having had Wills and lived with him up to now he's 15, do you have any thoughts about what you think contributes to the diagnosis of autism?
I can tell you as a mom what I think. You know, I don't, obviously, I mean, I know that's how you're
not
asking me as
comfortable
well.
to answer that.
Oh, I'm so comfortable asking. I'll answer as best I can anything, because I'm seriously not going to be not telling the truth. I'm just going to do it who I am. And because I think we have to talk about these things. These things are really important. Will's had what's called early onset autism. So even as an infant, within his 3rd month checkup, they were saying to us, something's not quite right, and I already knew that. I mean, he was very listless. He cried whenever he was not with me. I mean, I literally could, if I took a shower, my husband stood outside the shower, and so we had to get a see-through shower curtain so he could see. I'm like, thanks, everybody. And he'd been inside me for 9 months, and I was like, really? Really? And I can't even go to Starbucks by myself. I mean, it was like I was wearing a sweater 24/7, and that was really not. That was not usual. He didn't want to go to his father. He didn't want to go to my sister. He was very loving and there all the time. And so I know. And then the thing that get her myself, Will said, taking my Kleenex and handing it to Michael. As the 3 of us made our way inside, the clamor escalated. Parrots squawking, dogs barking, and people shouting into their cell phones. But Will, steady. In front of us was a long, tapered staircase. Will's, Cowboys at the top of those stairs, I told him. She's up there all right, Michael echoed, giving Will's a little squeeze. Will's eyes followed that stairway all the way to the top. Boy, she's high, he said, repeating the sentence under his breath 2 or 3 more times. Does she know I'm coming? Mommy told her you were going to be here today, Michael said. Will's focus on the top of those steps, as one of the employees, eager to help us, ran up together. Will's was pale, with his eyebrows practically touching his hairline. Michael picked him up. This is pretty exciting, but a little scary too, huh? He asked. Will's nodded. It's a big moment, Michael confirmed. Just then, the young employee walked down the steps carrying Cowboy, the most beautiful golden retriever puppy Will's could have ever imagined. I told Wills as calmly as I could because I really wanted to yell it. That's her, honey. That's your girl, Cowboy. She looked sleepy with those irresistible droopy brown eyes. Her blonde hair as fragile and fluffy as new grass. Wills wriggled out of Michael's arms, the store clerk handing Cowboy to Wills. Hold her just like this, he said, tucking Wills's hand under her bottom. She's a cutie, Wills said in a clear but timid voice. I placed a hand under Cowboy's warm tummy to help steady her. You're a pro, Michael said. You're doing great, I echoed. Isn't she a cutie? Wills said, again, eyes on the top of Cowboy's head. She's perfect, I told him, and kissed the top of his head. Michael and I were paying the final bill while Will stood next to me, Cowboy snuggling against his small chest. The shop had exploded with even more shoppers crowding in to hold the Himalayan cats or buy squeaky rubber stocking stuffers. Is that your dog? A woman with perfect blonde highlights and a Birkin bag asked Will. I instinctively stepped forward to rescue him from the awkwardness of talking to a stranger, but I didn't need to. Yes, he told her, turning so she could see Cowboy's face. She's a cutie. She sure is, the woman said. And then something happened. It was so small. He got upset and they made fun of him. They're like, Will, you know, and he took it so hard. And it just got to be, it wasn't that, but I made that up. But anyway, whatever they said. It was concrete then, but now, so he went to see, he had to look at different schools because now this school, Frosting said he's ready to move on. And so we looked at different schools, and speaking of concrete, he went to a school called Waverly for the day to see if he would like it and to see if they would accept him for 9th grade. So he comes out and he says to me, oh, he said, something funny, Lisa Simpson is the headmaster. Because you know, her name was Lisa Simpson because he's so concrete. Yes. So I said, oh, that's funny. Is her name Lisa Simpson? He goes, no, it's Lisa Groening. It's Matt Groening's sister. Lisa Simpson was based on her. It's the real Lisa Simpson. Like, he was looking at me like, what's wrong with you? I'm so behind. And sometimes I am so behind. And sometimes I'm not where I should be with him. But sometimes he comes up. He wrote the whole first 10 pages of a Simpson script that got nominated for Writers Guild Award 3 years ago. And the white limo that he wanted. Nobody comes in a limo, by the way, at the Writers Guild Awards. But we said, okay, sure, we'll have, because he saw us go to the Emmys in the limo and whatever, and often not win, but that's fine. Just kidding. We are not that, you know, but we got stuck in the drive-thru at McDonald's. He wasn't allowed to have McDonald's or soda or anything like that, but that night he had his first tux on, and he got to have a small Coke, and which was bad, by the way, because then he got sick to his stomach, which was my. I'm just doing all kinds of bad mothering things. So anyway, we got stuck in the drive-thru. But anyway, he's that funny now, and he's that ironic that and he wasn't allowed to watch The Simpsons until he was almost 10. That was really hard for me to let him watch that show. I have some issues about it, and I'm really thankful for that show.
You spoke about vaccinations earlier. What kind were you referring to?
The MMR, the measles, the rubella. What is it? Measles,
Measles,
mumps, and rubella. That's the one that they targeted. But then they said, the CDC said that, I don't know if it was the CDC, somebody called this guy out that did all the research on it and said that his research was bogus, which was like
the British Medical Journal. What is it? Not Lancet.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. And so now they're sort of back to square one. But I think then, I've heard hundreds and hundreds of stories while I've been out touring. What's happening then if it's not the metals? What is it that's going on? So something's going on in the environment, but I don't know what. I do think it triggers something. But
Jake's got an uncle who's autistic.
Okay, so again in the family line. I say, my family just has like general craziness, and Michael's family has a little bit of autism. So I say to Will, be glad you got that one.
I think one of the things that confuses folks, and especially parents who are dealing with kids who are diagnosed with autism or within the spectrum, is that there was a time when autism was totally unknown. And these are kids who,
For me
20,
too.
30,
I didn't
40
know
years
it.
ago, they would have been warehoused. They would have been mentally retarded.
They were.
Categorized that way.
They were. They were
warehoused.
special needs.
And nobody was really wondering
Special
about what caused it. They were just the ones that weren't lucky. And with the advance of insight into how the brain works and how it's complicated.
And early intervention.
And early intervention and behavioral modification for autistic kids in particular, helping them understand the subtle cues that we take for granted that they can't process. With an understanding of the need to do that, I think we're now finding that even autism itself, it is a spectrum, and it's a spectrum disorder for that reason. I think that there are a lot of situations that are unique within that spectrum, and that's what makes it so hard to figure out what is the cause.
That's exactly
right. In every single case will probably not be the same, and it makes it very, very difficult to hit a moving target like that. And it almost has to be a tablet effect when you've got situations like that. It's very difficult for folks to cope with.
It's hard, yeah.
And I think humans want to have.
They want to have that
It's
answer.
this. Yeah, I do.
They want to know.
I want an answer.
I
It's
think
this.
the biggest problem is because, like your husband, I know that my husband probably had Asperger's syndrome when he was growing up. Until you see it, you don't even know it. I mean, they learn how to cope and they learn how to, whatever.
And
He stumbled socially and he didn't know why, and that's why
research is so important because I think at some point they may discover that perhaps it's a combination of different things that are situational, and that particular combination in a particular case triggers it, as you mentioned. But that it may manifest itself in many different ways because of genetics or because of other factors that we just haven't figured out.
It's hard to know, but everybody says this, and this wasn't mine, of course, and they say this about a lot of things. But if you meet one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. I mean, they're as different as we are. And when people are portrayed as being like, they don't make eye contact, they talk in a monotone. I say, well, you should meet my son.
Yeah.
You should totally meet my son because that is not him at all. But then some of the things are.
There are commonalities. There are similarities.
Right.
I was wondering, remember idiot savants, when we used to use that term all the time, and I thought, like with your son and with my grandson, when he says something about Egyptian history we know that's the truth.
Right.
We don't question. If he says we did that on January 3rd at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, that's when we did it. Do you know that kind of thing?
Yes.
And I wonder if that term was something they used to use back then for these very focused people. I think Bill Gates is supposed to be Asperger's, and Einstein was
admitted
supposed
it.
to be. And it's really
Because they're very brilliant in some other way.
Yeah, but they're not all brilliant.
But I think one of the things that I would be very sorry about if it ever happens is if we find a way to fix everybody who has Asperger's or autism, because something you said earlier, I've said many times to people, I have an autistic son.
How old?
Well, it's kind of interesting. When he was 5 years old, we were told by a neurologist, based on a neurological exam that he did in his office that lasted about 5 minutes, that my son Christopher would probably be lucky if he ever learned to communicate, if he ever learned to dress
Yeah,
himself,
it's in here too.
or feed
Yes,
himself,
we
or
have
have
the same
help.
thing.
And if he could achieve those goals by the time he was 20 years old, we should consider ourselves lucky
Yes.
and consider ourselves blessed.
We have that
Christopher's
same
21 years old now. He's graduated from high school. He's sold some of his artwork at auction. He has been published in an autism-related publication, some of his short stories. He's a landscaper. He taught himself to play piano. He did 4 years in ROTC, and is the most amazing kid you could ever meet.
I'm sure.
And
He sounds like
if
it.
we had accepted what other people told us to believe back then, he might have had that. He might have had that kind of life. But because we also talked to other folks who had a different point of view and thought that there was a different way to approach this, and wanted to focus on the things that were remarkable about him, that were even apparent then.
Oh, yeah.
I think it really helped him achieve what he's achieved. So
Oh,
he's taught us an
congratulations.
awful lot, and I think that
You know what?
you
Your
said
story is
very
really,
true.
really important because I'm looking for your story now. I was reading everything about, babyhood, and then I read everything about elementary school and everything about middle school and adolescence, and now I've read everything there is about kids' high school, and now I'm looking for things about adult autism, and your story is really, you should think about writing that. I mean,
Well,
it's
we've
really...
had people tell us that because it's been a long road. And then he was our first. And all of the feelings that we've had with not understanding.
It's your
where we
grandson
are.
calling.
Because we didn't have kids before, we were first-time parents, and we didn't recognize.
No, you can't
It's just supposed to happen now.
Right.
And now we have 3 other children, since Christopher, who've grown up with him. And the things that he has taught all of us are things that I think, without Christopher, we wouldn't be the parents that we are. His brothers and sister would not be the people that they are because of the things they've learned from him.
Right.
There are things that he'll say from time to time, and I'll say, if I lived to be 10,000 years old, I never would have looked at it that way.
Me too, right.
There's tremendous wisdom in the way he's seeing this particular aspect of the world that I would never have seen that.
That's great. Well,
So being able to
congratulations.
get those nuggets is a blessing.
That's
So
wonderful.
Keep doing what you're doing.
You gave me all kinds of hope on that one.
I just wanted to say something to Monica. We have a fund and we pay for the authors to come and see us. Well, she said no, so I have her check here, and we're going to put it back into our fund. But we're going to do one other thing too. If you'll sign the back of this, we're going to put it in, and we're going to adopt a book. So we will match those funds and adopt some books out.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
That's lovely. Very nice. Thank you. Oh, thank you very much.
She went, oh, yes, please, John.
We have kind of a tradition. This is the first part of it. The second part of it I'm going to ask you to help me with a little later if you have a few minutes. But for the authors who visit us, we would like to give you something to remind you of your visit with us and to thank you for taking the time to come. And today, for me, it's particularly relevant because of the story that you've had to tell. And the fact that it's resonated with so many people. And I'm sure that wherever you go, there are a lot of folks who are touched by this. So,
I'm always touched by
well,
your stories like I was today.
The Friends of the Corona Public Library sponsor these events, and these are some of the best attended and most popular events. And we wanted to give this to you, and it says the Friends of the Corona Library. Right. So hopefully, wherever you go, you'll take the badge.
I will.
And you'll tell people with pride that you visited our library. And,
This is the most amazing library I've ever been in, and I've been in
And all the
many
artwork we
libraries.
have. Well, the Friends of the Library have been very instrumental in this, all these creative things. So
It's incredible.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, isn't it fun?
It's such a creative, amazing place. I can't imagine what Wills would do if he saw. Well, Darlene said if Wills saw this place, he would love it. He would love it. You've done an amazing job.
Well, thank you
So
very
that,
much.
thank you.
And